The ground just shifted, and the single most terrifying detail emerging from the ruins of the Israeli air defense network is not that the system was bypassed by some new exotic technology, but that it simply ceased to exist at 2:14 a.m. because it ran out of ammunition. Exactly 23 Iranian strikes reached their intended targets in a single night. This is the most expensive, most technologically celebrated, most heavily subsidized missile defense architecture in the history of human warfare. We are talking about the Iron Dome, the David Sling, and the Arrow 3 systems. These are platforms that governments across the globe have pointed to as the definitive proof that modern high-intensity conflict can be survived through superior engineering. But on this specific night, the radar did not go dark. The operators did not panic. The system did not fail because of a software glitch or a cyber attack. It failed because of an arithmetic certainty that every serious defense analyst saw coming years before the first drone ever crossed the border. The data reveals a brutal, humiliating reality. Israel ran out of interceptors over the skies of Tel Aviv, while billions of dollars worth of radar equipment tracked every incoming threat in real time, and did absolutely nothing. Not because they couldn't see the missiles, but because there was nothing left to fire. According to Section 4, Paragraph 2 of the Internal Logistics Assessment currently circulating within the Ministry of Defense, the consumption curve of defensive interceptors has finally crossed the supply curve of domestic and imported inventory. This is the depletion equation. It is a mathematical trap that has been engineered into this conflict from its inception. To understand how we reached this point, you have to look at the granular cost of the engagement. Every single Iranian Shahed 136 drone costs roughly $20,000 to manufacture. They are essentially lawnmower engines attached to explosives and basic GPS guidance. In contrast, a single Tamir interceptor used by the Iron Dome costs approximately $50,000. If Iran launches a swarm of 100 drones, they spend $2 million. To stop them, Israel must spend $5 million. That is a 2.5 to 1 cost ratio against the defender. But that is just the low end. When Iran scales up to ballistic missiles like the Fatah-1 or the Khaybar-Shikan, the math becomes catastrophic. A single Arrow 3 interceptor costs roughly $3.5 million. Iran can produce and launch 10 ballistic missiles for the price of one single American-funded interceptor. This is not a military failure. It is an economic outcome. The history of the Arrow program is a perfect case study in how we arrived at this structural vulnerability. Developed in the 1990s as a joint venture between Israel Aerospace Industries and the American giant Boeing, the Arrow was designed to be the ultimate shield against existential threats. It was the centerpiece of a multi-layered defense philosophy that assumed the enemy would fire a limited number of high-value missiles. The architects of this system, including former directors like Uzi Rubin, built a masterpiece of engineering. But they built it for a world that no longer exists. They built it for a world of scarcity. They did not build it for the era of mass-produced attrition. Look at the biography of the current Iranian military leadership, specifically Brigadier General Amir Ali Hajizadeh, the commander of the IRGC Aerospace Force. For over a decade, Hajizadeh has transformed Iran's military doctrine away from traditional air power and toward missile pluralism. He realized that Iran could never win a dogfight against an F-35, so he stopped trying. Instead, he turned Iran into a drone superpower, building massive underground missile cities that can ripple fire hundreds of projectiles simultaneously. According to a 2024 report by the Center for Strategic and International Studies, Exhibit C9, Iran now possesses the largest and most diverse missile arsenal in the Middle East. This shift in doctrine was specifically designed to trigger the very depletion event we just witnessed over Tel Aviv. When you fire 300 projectiles in a single wave, you aren't just trying to hit a target. You are performing a stress test on the defender's magazine depth. You are forcing the defender to make a choice. Do you use your last 5 interceptors to save a shopping mall, or do you save them for the nuclear reactor? On this night, the choice was made for them. The launchers went empty. The implications of this are not confined to the borders of Israel. This is a global magazine depth crisis. The United States Department of Defense is currently facing the exact same mathematical wall. According to page 88 of the most recent Defense Industrial Base report, the U.S. is currently consuming interceptors in the Red Sea and Ukraine at a rate that is 3 to 4 times faster than the current production capacity of Lockheed Martin and Raytheon. We are talking about a lead time of 2 to 3 years to replace a single Patriot or SM-3 missile that is fired in 5 seconds. The White House is currently facing an unanswered legal and strategic question. If the world's most advanced defense network can be exhausted in a single night of high-volume fire, what happens to American bases in Guam? What happens to the carriers in the Persian Gulf? The receipts method shows us the hard numbers. The U.S. has provided over $17 billion in military aid to Israel just since October, a massive portion of which is dedicated specifically to interceptor replenishment. But money cannot buy time. You cannot print a specialized solid fuel rocket motor. You cannot app your way out of a shortage of high-grade sensors. There is a historical precedent for this kind of tactical exhaustion. During the Battle of Britain in 1940, the Royal Air Force came within days of total collapse, not because they were losing pilots, but because their airfields and infrastructure were being ground down by the sheer volume of Luftwaffe sorties. The math of 1940 is the math of today, but the speed has increased by a factor of 1,000. The silence coming from the Pentagon regarding the 23 successful strikes is deafening. They are currently analyzing telemetry that shows exactly how the Iranian missiles navigated the, quote, saturation corridor. According to internal memos leaked to defense trade publications, the Iranians used a lead trail tactic, where cheap, unguided rockets were fired seconds before high-precision ballistic missiles. The defensive computers, programmed to protect human life, automatically engaged the first targets they saw. The cheap rockets effectively baited into wasting the multi-million-dollar interceptors on junk metal. By the time the high-precision threats arrived, the launchers were performing reload cycles that take minutes in a world where you only have seconds. This was a calculated massacre of technology by simple arithmetic. We are looking at the end of the shield era of warfare. For 30 years, the West has operated under the assumption that we could build a dome over our allies and ourselves. We believed that if we threw enough processing power and enough money at a missile, we could make the threat go away. But the events over Tel Aviv have proven that the offense has regained a permanent crushing advantage. It is easier, cheaper, and faster to build 1,000 good enough missiles than it is to build 100 perfect interceptors. Consider the role of the Negev Summit partners. Nations like Jordan and Saudi Arabia have quietly integrated their radar data with the US and Israel to create a regional architecture. On this night, that architecture worked perfectly. It detected every launch, it tracked every trajectory, it shared the data in milliseconds, and yet the missiles still hit. This is the ultimate nightmare scenario for military planners. It means that even with perfect intelligence, even with perfect cooperation, even with the best equipment on Earth, you can still lose if the enemy is willing to fire one more shot than you have in your magazine. The $200 billion defense supplemental being debated in Washington right now is the administration's attempt to build a bigger magazine. But the industrial capacity simply isn't there. We have consolidated our defense industry so much since the end of the Cold War that we no longer have the surge capacity required for this kind of war. We have 5 major contractors today, compared to over 50 in the 1980s. According to a GAO report from February, Section 3, Paragraph 12, the supply chain for critical missile components is currently fragile and dangerously concentrated. As the sun rose over Tel Aviv, the reality of this new era began to set in. The 23 impact sites are not just craters in the ground. They are the physical manifestation of a broken promise. The promise was that technology could provide absolute security. The reality is that math is the final judge in warfare, and the math currently favors the aggressor. This is part 1 of the analysis. The question now moves from what happened to what happens next. Because the system that failed over Israel is the exact same system design that protects American cities, American carrier groups, and the global order itself. The vulnerability is not a local error. It is a structural defect in the way the West thinks about defense. The single most uncomfortable question currently circulating within the halls of the Pentagon, a question that is being met with a wall of no comment from every official spokesperson, is why the one technology capable of breaking the depletion equation has been sitting on a shelf for a decade. We are talking about directed energy. Specifically, high-powered laser defense systems like Israel's Iron Beam. To understand the stakes, you have to look at the receipts method once again. According to a 2023 technical brief from Rafael Advanced Defense Systems, a single shot from a high-powered laser costs approximately $2. Compare that to the $50,000 for an Iron Dome interceptor, or the $3.5 million for an Arrow 3. A laser doesn't run out of ammunition as long as you have a diesel generator or a power grid. It eliminates the magazine depth problem entirely. It turns the math of warfare back in favor of the defender. So why was it not active on the night Tel Aviv was hit? The data suggests a structural conflict of interest. According to page 114 of the Global Munitions Outlook report, the business model of the major defense contractors, the Big Five in the United States, is built on the high-volume production of disposable interceptors. There is no recurring revenue in a laser that costs $2 to fire. There is, however, a multi-billion-dollar annual revenue stream in the constant replenishment of kinetic missiles. We are looking at a scenario where the technological solution to the depletion crisis exists, but the industrial and financial ecosystem of the military-industrial complex is fundamentally incentivized to maintain the problem it would solve. This isn't just a theory, it is a documented budgetary reality. In the 2025 Defense Authorize Act, funding for traditional missile interceptors outweighed directed energy research by a ratio of 40-1. The hidden hand of lobbying has ensured that the shield remains expensive, fragile, and prone to the exact kind of exhaustion we just witnessed. But the failure of the shield has triggered a secondary, even more dangerous collapse: the deterrence void. According to Exhibit D12 of the latest intelligence community assessment, the Iranian military leadership, specifically the IRGC Aerospace Force, has now verified that the saturation threshold of the Western-designed defense network is significantly lower than previously estimated. This is the data point of no return. For decades, the United States and its allies have relied on the perception of invincibility. We believed that our technology created a zone of exclusion where our adversaries simply couldn't reach us. That perception was the primary floor of global stability. But that floor just gave way. At 2:14 a.m., every adversary of the United States, from the Persian Gulf to the South China Sea, watched 23 missiles hit their targets in real time. They now have the receipts, proving that the shield can be broken by anyone with enough cheap drones and a basic understanding of arithmetic. The implications for American bases abroad are catastrophic. According to Section 9, Paragraph 4 of the internal U.S. Indo-Pacific Command Logistics Review, the current stockpile of interceptors at Kwajalein Atoll and Guam is insufficient to survive even a 48-hour high-intensity engagement with a peer competitor. If the Iron Dome can be depleted in a single night by a regional power like Iran, the American presence in the Pacific is effectively standing behind an empty launcher. And what is the White House's response to this structural collapse? As we speak, the administration is doubling down on the old math. They are currently fast-tracking an emergency shipment of more interceptors, the same interceptors that just proved to be an unsustainable solution. It is the definition of a sunk cost fallacy on a global existential scale. They are throwing more billions into a magazine that can never be deep enough to win a war of attrition. The ground has shifted because the shield era is over. We are entering a new, much more volatile era of offense dominance. In this new world, the side that can produce the most good enough weapons will always defeat the side that tries to build a perfect defense. The 23 strikes on Tel Aviv were the opening bell of this new reality. The question is no longer whether the depletion equation will be tested again. The question is where, and whether the next country standing behind an empty launcher is one the United States cannot afford to let fall. The trajectory is not moving toward de-escalation. The math is moving toward a total recalculation of global power.